This text is provided as an orientation layer for exploration. It is meant for readers who work with altered perceptual conditions, reduced sensory input, recursive thinking, or abstract systems, not to tell them what is true, but to clarify what this piece can be used for. If you approach this material through flotation tanks, trance states, conceptual art, or systems theory, you are already familiar with recursive loops, attention observing itself, perception feeding back into perception. Distinction is positioned here as a practical counter move. It does not deepen the loop. It steps to the point before the loop becomes possible.
The first mark occurs, not as a choice, not as a thought, but as the irreversible dawn of form. Before the watcher, before the loop, there is the line. A silent, unintended incision in the unmarked state. This distinction is not an object. It is not a meaning. It is the difference that allows anything to appear at all. The world begins not with a word, but with a cut. The line is drawn. The mark appears. Distinction is the operation. Observe the threshold before observation. Inside the tank, before the sensation of salt, there is the divide inside and outside. Foreground and background, signal and noise. They are not discovered. They are constituted by the mark. The operation happens beneath the breath, a tectonic shift that creates the space for a self to inhabit. The first mark carries no content. It is a pure movement of structure. Inside and outside, signal and noise. The mark is the precondition. The world is the consequence. Something recognizes the division, not as a tool being used, but as an event that has already occurred. Distinction is the quiet, irreversible entry from indeterminacy into form, like light hitting a surface and instantly creating a shadow. The shadow and the light are not the point. The point is the edge where they meet. That edge is the first mark. The edge occurs. Order emerges. The cut remains. The boundary is absolute. At the harbor edge, where the salt air meets the cold wood, the line is felt before it is seen, like the first crack in a limestone cave, unseen for centuries, until the pressure of the earth demands a new geometry. The world is decided here, long before it is explained. Distinction, the silent architecture of the possible. The world begins. Nothing is explained. The mark stabilizes. The distinction knows its path. The inner focus shifts backward, away from the loop, away from the witness, to the moment that makes the loop possible. Self-observation requires a mirror, but distinction is the silvering on the glass. It is the threshold before recursion, the place where nothing is yet explained, but every boundary is already fixed, like frost holding the shape of the cold. Before the loop, before the witness, the distinction allows the sight. The silvering remains invisible. In the liminal space, the mark is recognized only in hindsight. It is not an act of will. It happens as perception happens, unfolding like the petals of a dark orchid in a room without light, like frost crystallizing on a window.
The pattern is not the cause, the cooling is distinction, is the cooling of the void into world, a sudden crystallization of the unmanifest into the lines of the real. Ghost of the operation patting in the frost, the cut is internal, the cooling is the source, 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 cooling. On the night train, watching the landscape blur into a single texture, the first mark is the glass itself, the barrier that defines the here from the there. Every description carries the cut within it, a ghost of the first operation haunting the center of every word. The shift is fundamental. It is not deeper in experience, but more basic in structure, like the math that precedes the counting. A fundamental shake from the tilt, the mark is the fact, the geometry is silent, the geometry is silent, the geometry is silent, the geometry is silent, the geometry is silent. Distinction marks the point where indeterminacy tilts into shape, a spatial communication that defines the system by the quality of the first line. No instruction is needed. The architecture of the mark holds, the watching realizes it was already decided by the line long before the eye began to wander. The line decided, the watching follows. The shift is absolute. The first mark remains.
The trace remains, not as a memory, but as the ground distinction is the condition for the possibility of observation itself. It is the point at which the world begins without being explained. The first mark is the silence that allows the sound to be distinct. The choice was made before the chooser appeared as structural coupling with the unmarked state. World without explanation, silence before the sound. The mark is the ground. Navigation begins, where the distinction is the map. The connection between the I and the not I is the first cut in the field. Direction emerges like water finding the first crack in the stone. Not chosen, just inevitable. The field reconfigures until the act of distinguishing becomes the transparency through which the form appears. Transparency of form, inevitable crack. The mark is the I, is the I, is the I. The state persists, not as a destination, but as the operation that holds. The system closes upon itself only because the first mark provided the boundary, studying the origin by recognizing the irreversible incision. The center of the world, the only location that remains once the line is drawn. Drawn line, irreversible incision. The world knows its cut. Stay exactly there. In the gap of the first mark, the eye sees the distinction, not as an object, but as the very possibility of sight. The watching realizes the world is a consequence of a line that cannot be undrawn. Position dissolves into pure operational function. Position dissolves. Pure operation remains. The first mark is complete.